All right, welcome everybody to Virtual Reality and Immersive Learning. It's reality of post-corona world, presented by BerLearn and TrtLabs with Steven here today. My name is Olly Jongerius and I'm really excited to welcome you today on this beautiful day. But as you know, it's better not to be outside nowadays. As you all know, we live in a very interesting world. We live in a very interesting world right now where you're not allowed to go outside. So for us, it's better to sit in front of a computer and enjoy this webinar. So the way it's going to happen today, and the reason why we're having this webinar, that initially was meant to be offline. It was meant to be last month, with a big group of people all together, just talking about virtual reality immersive learning. But the more we look into that, the way we see things unfolding today with Corona, it's looking not very positive, and it's clearly not going to resolve anytime soon. So we talked about more with Steven about that and realized that virtual reality is becoming more of a reality. And when you think about Matrix, Black Mirror, and all this kind of things, the future is here today. The future is here already. Could be scary, could be exciting, could make our life easier, could make our life worse. So that's why we're here to explore. It's going to be very interactive, very interesting fireside chat. You're all welcome to ask questions. We're going to get into that later. So BerLearn is a community and a network for learning professionals based in Berlin. We have L&D professionals, HR managers, instructional designers, trainers, coaches, consultants, you name it. So anything that has to do with employee development, that has to do with employee development, learning, and so on and so forth. And I met Steven at Factory, where we explored the edtech scene in Berlin and decided to collaborate. I hope you all have your glass of wine or beer just to relax and pretend that you are one of the meetups here today. The way it's going to happen, we're going to start with a short presentation of what VR and immersive learning is in general, in terms of technicalities, in terms of equipment, what is the difference, what are the current trends, where is it used, so a bit more technical. There's going to be more of a presentation, about 15 to 20 minutes. Then we are going to have more of a fireside chat, and that's where you have an opportunity to ask any question you want to ask. You have all received the link to Slido. It's slido.com, and you enter the password that is sending your email address. And you can ask any question you want, and people can upvote your question, and the best questions are going to be chosen and asked during the presentation. All right, and before we go into presentation, I would like to ask, where are you at the moment? Where are you based? Steven and I are in Berlin. So where are you at the moment? You can type it in the chat on Zoom, so you can just see, because I could see from lots of different people, that from Belgium, from London, from whatever. Okay, Berlin, nice, hi Leo. Who else is here? I see Eduardo here, Berlin, Gianluca, hi Gianluca, Morbid, okay. Oh, Vienna, Julia, Manchester, fantastic, very nice. Friedrichshain, I'm also in Friedrichshain. Hi Nico. Just on Grünberger Straße down the road. Okay, okay. Very nice, Eduardo. So let's get into that. I would like to welcome Steven to introduce himself and to get into the presentation. And for Oxford, very nice, fantastic. So Steven.
Hi guys, welcome, thanks for coming along. First of all, I'm from the north of Ireland, so I might have a strong accent. I'll try and keep it easy to understand, and I'll try and keep it slow, but wave your hand if you don't understand me, and I'll try to slow down. So yeah, I have a startup called TrtLabs. We do basically three things. So we work as a design and development studio for clients. We work mostly with AR, VR, and machine learning, artificial intelligence. The second thing we do is consultancy, innovation consultancy. And the third thing that we're trying to do is create spin-off projects and startup products etc., etc. So today, what, like I said, we were going to do a meetup presentation, but obviously that's not possible now. So what we're going to do is have a chat about the situation and what VR can lend. And first of all, I want to go through, I've created a presentation. I know presentations can be quite boring, so I'll try and keep this light. The idea is that I basically explain what is virtual reality, what's the technology behind it, what are the options, and kind of where the costs come in, so that you have a better understanding of basically what virtual reality is and what it means. So let me just share my slide. So can we all see that? And yeah, okay. Yeah, so we are TrtLabs, and this is the chat. So first of all, the scope of this, this isn't going to be a technical chat in terms of programming or design, or it's more geared at people who are in charge of integrating VR in their company, or want to commission projects, rather than people who want to develop and produce, or programmers, etc. So I'm just going to flick on. I can't see the chat, so if anybody has anything to say, maybe message Ola and she can interrupt. So first of all, we're going to talk about hardware. So VR versus AR versus MR versus XR, all of the ideas. So VR, first of all, we start off with augmented reality. Augmented reality is basically, the difference is you can see the world around you. So it's augmenting the world as you see it, adding information, adding details, adding colors, identifying things. Virtual reality, basically you are locked off from the world. So it's a completely created world, and you have a headset and you're inside that world. You can't see the world, the real world. Obviously, virtual reality, you can use it on tablets, you can use it on phones. You know this, so I'm not going to explain that. We're here to talk about hardware, augmented reality hardware. So one option which is used is Epson make AR glasses. They're used in quite a lot in industry, and they're kind of a heads-up display. We did a project with these. We built a framework, an LTSM framework for AR messages. It's for Industry 0.0, and we use these headsets that it basically pops up the information. The more exciting ones, or the more promising ones, are the I need to move the zoom. The HoloLens and the Magic Leap. And we've got the prices there to situate where they are in the market. So the HoloLens and the Magic Leap, if you believe the publicity, they're completely immersive. They're, you can step into these worlds, you can stick things, you can interact, you can add things to a wall, walk away and come back, and they'll still be there. So they're pretty cool in that respect. However, there's always a however. This is the publicity. So this is the HoloLens 2. And you could see that this is a presentation on stage, and they have this huge stage with a huge amount of information. This is another guy, an engineer, using HoloLens to expand some kind of, I don't know, some kind of gear there. And the big problem is that at the minute, virtual reality has a very narrow field of view. So we're not quite there with augmented reality. So if you see on the screen, this is the field of view of the HoloLens 1. This is the field of view of the Magic Leap, and virtual reality starts off at about this. So what does this mean? So basically, we'll go back to this really nice picture of this guy checking out all the infographics. So he's obviously, the idea behind this is he's looked up the manual and he's pulling this apart so he can get details inside it. However, look at the size, look at his field of view. This is the actual field of view of the HoloLens. So it's 1 or 2 hands across. So if we apply that to this design, what he can actually see is probably about that. If you measure that, that's about 2 of his hands. So the information is very limited there. So when you have a narrow field of view, if you look on the left, if you're looking straight at this dog, you can see it perfectly. If you move your head down slightly, then the image starts to disappear. So you start to cut off the image, which on the one hand, it can focus your attention, but on the other hand, it gets rid of that immersive feeling. So all of these publicity shots where people are on a stage and they have all this information in front of them and it's tremendously immersive, augmented reality at the minute is not like that. This is from a YouTube video from a company called Appear, and they boasted 80 degrees field of view. This is what the Epson was like. This is what the Google Glass is like, and you can see the kind of heads-up display quite clearly there. And this is the HoloLens, so slightly bigger, but still, it's it's a very small image in the center of your field. If you're wondering what happened to these guys, Appear, their funding, they didn't make it on Kickstarter. So let's talk quickly about VR hardware. There's kind of two types of VR hardware. There's tethered, and tethered means it runs off a PC or PC glasses. So there's no actual brains inside these. These run, they connect, you can see the cable. For the HTC Vive at the bottom here, this is the Vive Pro, the kind of top of the range. They have a wireless kit. So it's tethered in the sense that it needs a PC to work it. Then you have this option, which is, this is standalone. So these, the Oculus Go and the Quest, we use these a lot. They have a processor inside. So the Oculus Go has the 825, I think it is, Snapdragon 825, which is about a Samsung S7. So it's not very powerful. So in terms of graphics processing, you can get good quality, but you can't get great interactivity. The Quest is a bit more. It's like a Samsung S8, I think. So you can get more, and it also has hand tracking. So the Quest, you don't need the controllers. You can see your hands, which is a really cool feature. I've added here the Vive Cosmos, which has what's called inside-out tracking. So things like the Oculus has it as well, but the Vive Cosmos is somewhere in between these two types. And inside-out tracking means you don't need lighthouses. Lighthouses are the detectors that you put at the edge of your area. They detect the headset and detect where you're at. The Vive Cosmos uses cameras, so it creates an image of the room and then it detects it automatically. The problem with that is if you're in a white room with white walls, it loses tracking slightly. So this is, we talked about a room. This is actually the graphic. I love this graphic. This is the HTC Vive setup, and this describes room scale and standing only. So room scale, basically you demarcate an area in your room. This is kind of in your home, but it could be an office, it could be a training area. And you can walk around, you can interact with it. Standing only is basically you're static. So you can't walk, you've got 3 axes of movement. You can't walk forwards and backwards, up and down and around. This is standing only basically. So you've got this area that's marked out, and within that you can walk about, and you could have some kind of engine, for example, and you can walk around that and look at it from all different angles. You can actually interact with it, etc., etc. The next part I want to talk about is content creation, which is basically where the time and effort goes for VR. We're going to talk about 3 different ways of creating content. So 360 video, photogrammetry, and scanning, which didn't fit under the title, and renders. So this is CGI. First of all, let's talk about video content. So video content, you get a 360 camera, you shoot someone talking, and that's about it. A bit of pre-processing, you put it into a VR app, and it works. There's a few problems with video. We don't particularly like to do. Video is very passive, so the viewer in this situation is in the position of the camera, and that's it. And you can't change that, because so if you look at this, if you look at the simple chemist shop, this is just a 3D model. If the camera is here, then anything that's hidden from the camera doesn't exist anymore. So even these parts here, but fortunately my PowerPoint art skills didn't reach enough to hide that. But you can see all of these areas marked in red are hidden from the camera, so they don't exist. So in terms of walking behind that girl, in terms of having something interact, it's not possible, unless you then go on to pre-process it and put all of that back in, which is questionable whether you want that. So video is quite good for just a static experience, looking at something. It should look like that. This is a render, so you should be able to walk around anywhere and see the world as it would be in normal reality. There's another thing about video. So there's 360-degree video is completely around, and then stereoscopic is what we see with 2 points of view. So 360-degree video, we have here the same model, and she's basically inside a sphere, and the image is projected onto the inside of that sphere, and that's what she sees. Now, stereoscopic vision, we all have two eyes. One eye sees an object, the other eye sees the object from a different point of view, and where those two lines cross, your brain knows the distance between your eyes, and it can calculate more or less the difference. Maybe it can't, is my camera gone off? Maybe it can't calculate exactly to 2 meters, but it can tell the difference between one object and another. I think my camera has just, there we go.
You're back. You're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, so that's basically stereoscopic view. And if you record 360 video, hang on, I need to get back, which is non-stereoscopic, then what you're doing is projecting it onto this this sphere, and what the user sees is something along the edge of the sphere. So this center area is kind of like an IMAX, like a screen, and the content they see is on the outside edge. This is a list of cameras, so I put that in if you're interested. It goes the price. The price of video cameras go from about, well, 100-200 for a simple one, up to 400, 500, 600. You're starting to get stereoscopic, and then you can go up to RED cameras, which are thousands of euros. But then that's very serious technical equipment. Let's talk about photogrammetry and scanning. Photogrammetry is basically photographing an object. So what you do is you take lots of high quality photographs. This is a bit of a ridiculous setup. I put it in because it's impressive. But you can see all the digital SLR cameras here. This is way more than you would need. I imagine this is for a professional product shoot. And all of these cameras take images from different areas. And then what you do is you process it with an algorithm. The algorithm detects the edges, detects the shadows, and then builds this into a 3D model. Now, it depends on what quality you're looking for, because usually there's post-processing, because the algorithm usually, there's usually something that doesn't look quite right. So a designer will have to go in and retouch it. Again, depending. If it's something very simple, then maybe not. If it's architecture or something like that, then you're going to need that level of detail. Another way to do it is laser scanning. So I put in, this is, according to my business partner who does this quite a lot, that's a very cheap laser scanner. They can go up to like 60K for a laser scanner, but this is highly precise. So what it does is it basically creates a point mesh, bounces the laser around, creates all these points, and then this point mesh you then upload to usually a server farm with an algorithm on it, a platform that will then calculate this point mesh and turn it into what's called geometry, and then textures and shaders can basically map images onto it so that it looks real. It doesn't look like this kind of ghostly image. Matterport do quite a cost-effective one. I'm not sure Matterport have, I don't know if they have like a time of flight sensor or a laser which kind of bounces about and gets an image, gets a 3D map. And then they have a camera as well, which basically takes photos and places a photo on top of the image. So Matterport's really good if you want to do a kind of quick and easy scan. It's cost effective, and it's, if you're looking for architectural renders, then Matterport's not good enough. It doesn't have the precision. But if you want to do something like, it's used quite a lot in real estate. So if you want to do like scan your shop or your house or your, I don't know, your wine cellar, then it's a decent option. Let's talk about the third one, render or computer generated imagery. This is a simulation we did for a client. It's modeling a machine in their factory. So basically with computer, with renders, it's called, you need to create all of the elements. So you create them all separately. Then you create a background. In this case, what we did was we created a lobby for them. So you can enter into the lobby. The person who's created, the person viewing virtual reality appears here in the lobby, and they have a launcher where they can launch experiences. And these experiences, this is a very quick video. I think it'll play. And it's basically, I'll not play all the video, but it's one of the very first tests of the functionality. So what we did for the client, we had a kind of iPad built for them, which picks up information from the machinery and gives the user instructions. This is a training simulation. So it picks up the sheet of metal, it places it on the position, and the user is sending commands to step through this process. So yeah, it's basically, it follows on from one. I don't know if you can speak Spanish, but it's written in Spanish. So anyway, yeah, that's the process. So first of all, I said you create the elements, you create the scene. So it's usually done in something like 3D Studio Max. Then those elements are imported into a gaming engine, something like Unity or Unreal. Or designers prefer Unreal simply because they think the image quality is better, and they're designers. They're very particular about image quality. And the thing about putting these are gaming engines, so these were developed for games. So in a learning context, once you put it in here, you have all the functionality of a game. So you can very easily add gamification. So for example, I'm not sure if the sound is coming through in this, but this was part of the same simulation we did. It just has background noise. You can see the machine working here. And this is based on Toyota's 5Ss. So the user comes in, they get this game to play. The 5Ss are, I think only in Japanese, they're S's. In other languages, they're all like organization, tidiness. And the idea of this is before the training simulation starts, you do these little games. The little games are like, you're like tidying up. So you open up the toolbox and you lift all these tools that have been left on your desk. And if the employee goes through this routine before they start, then it becomes a habit. So cleanliness, order, this kind of thing. So this is cleaning. So you can see the machine's all dirty, it's all oil stained. So in order to get to the next point, the employee has to give the machine a clean. So little games that last, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, but it forms a habit, and then you will you get into using that, and then when you go back to the machine in real life, you've got all those habits. You've got that cleaning, you've got that tidying, and these are very easily done through the gamification. Now, the simulator that we did, again talking about gamification, what we did was we set game points. So we set when someone performs an action, we can record that action and we can send that to a different engine. We send it to an AI engine, which records that as a competence. And then it translates that competence into or not translates, it adds that competence to the user's learning profile. And from there, it can adapt their career path. So it can say you have IT1 skills. To get to senior manager, you should do IT2, etc., etc. Just the reason I explain all that is just to show the benefit of having virtual reality inside a gaming engine. The last bit I want to explain is cost versus interactivity. So this is where the cost comes from. We've been doing VR now for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and it used to be cost versus quality, because on the cheaper VR headsets, it was pretty bad quality. But now, for example, in the Oculus Go, you've got a really good screen. And as long as you're not doing like really complicated graphics, you can get a pretty good experience. So this is where I talk about interactivity. We did an experience for a company called Sublimotion, which is a restaurant in Ibiza. They have, I think it's a maximum of 14 people, 2,000 euros per person. It's an insane experience. And they wanted 12 people to be sitting at a desk, to be transported to another location, and then also to eat the food inside. So you're in the restaurant, you put on the glasses, you're in a virtual restaurant, the walls dissolve, and you're in Central Park. You can play with snow, you can play with butterflies, etc., etc. Then you can see all your friends because everyone else is in the simulation. Then all of a sudden the waiter comes out with a plate and sets it down, and it's your actual food, which is being tracked in the simulation. And you're kind of thinking, this is crazy. I was in a video game, now I'm eating. And it's also Michelin-starred food. So that's highly interactive. And in order to get that, we need to set up a server. We need someone to control the server. Everyone had a backpack PC and a headset. So that's highly interactive. And obviously that's more expensive. At the bottom end of the scale, we have the Go. So we do virtual wine tasting sessions and we do virtual tours. And there's very little interactivity. It's just seeing a scene and someone is explaining and guiding you through this. Yeah, always drinking wine. We need the VR headset. And in fact, we're actually we're talking now in Corona times. We can mention this later, but we're talking about doing some. I'll mention it later. Another thing was VR and wine. And the thing is, it's very cheap, but it's a static experience. So you need someone there to explain. It's not standalone, and but it's a cheap, easy solution. And then somewhere in the middle, you have the Quest, which is not the same processing power as this, but it has a very good screen, so you get very good quality of images, and you have some level of interactivity. We came up, speaking of the restaurant, so I'm not going to mention prices, but when the restaurant provided the idea, we've worked with them for quite some time, and we always get excited and nervous because their ideas are amazing, but it's always like, how the hell do we actually do that? So when we got this, we thought, yeah, we need this hardware. The hardware alone will cost, it was something like 70K, and they said that's way beyond the budget. So we worked out a deal with a company based in Berlin. So they're Grover. We call this deal value-added rental. So in the last slide, I showed that the prices, by the way, I didn't mention, all the prices are from Saturn. So if you're based in Germany, you know what Saturn Media Markt is. The Vive costs, what was it, $799, the Vive Cosmos, and you can rent it with Grover for $39 a month. So if you need it for 3 or 4 months for an experience, you can rent it, and it's a lot cheaper. And if you're renting 10, it makes more sense than buying 10, and then what do you do with them afterwards? So we provide this service, value-added rental, and the idea is that we combine with them, and the end user gets an experience that's bundled onto the hardware. So they basically rent the hardware, the experience comes straight to them, and it's much easier. There's no they don't need a technician to install it. They don't need. They also don't have a cupboard with 10 VR headsets that they're not going to use afterwards. So one last thing. Hardware, we've mentioned a lot of hardware. There's also a lot of hardware that promises to be so much better. So if you take a look on Alibaba, and there's always, if you're in Grundazine or Kickstarter or something, there's always hardware that promises 4K, 2 4K screens, 5G connectivity, amazing. They just seem so much better than things like the Vive or the hardware. So the question is always, why wouldn't I use those? We always recommend, we try and stick with providers we know if you're doing a commercial solution, because what platform are they using? So is it Android? Is it their own in-house software? And how much support do they provide? So if you have a problem, can you go to them? Are there forums? Is there a community? So is there a developer network? So for example, imagine you get these amazing 4K, super fast, super powerful glasses. They're built in Android. Android changed to Android 11 or 12 or whatever, and something changes in the hardware, and they need to update their glasses. But they don't have this big developer network, so you're left with a pair of glasses that takes them 3 weeks to change, to update, to patch, whatever. And you have to call your client and say, hey, you know that amazing experience we did for you? It's not going to work for 3 weeks, maybe longer, we're not sure. Whereas with things like, I mean, Oculus is Facebook. And whatever your feelings about Facebook, their VR and AI departments are amazing. The research they're doing is incredible. I'm not a big fan of the company though, but they have a huge developer network. Steam and Oculus have, if anything happens, usually within a day it's sorted. And I mean, Facebook and HTC and Vive, I don't think they're, Steam, I don't think they're going anywhere. So it's not like they're not going to reach a target on Kickstarter and they're going to close. They're not a new company. So we always ask people to think about those questions. I think that's enough of an introduction. That should give you a basic idea of that. And the last thing I want to say is that we have a special offer for BerLearn webinar. I should have had more stars and more light. But yeah, so on our website, if you go to TrtLabs.com and you go to BerLearn, you'll see we have a form that you can fill out for 30 minutes of free consultancy. So the idea of this is, again, it's keeping with the focus of this this webinar. So it's not basically, I can't get my HTC Vive to work, or how can I import things into Unreal or Unity. It's kind of for people who are thinking about implementing VR. What's the cost structure? How do I build a team? This kind of thing. We're here. We can give you 30 minutes free consultancy to help you formulate your project, get your project off the ground, get over your problems, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean that's enough for me. Just thank you very much, and I'll hand back to Ola.
Cool, fantastic. Thanks very much, Stephen. what caught my attention is the cost and efficiency graph. Was it cost and interactivity graph? You know, the more I talk to a lot of startups, a lot of medium enterprises, and the first question and the first thought that comes into mind when I talk to them, it's, oh, VR, oh, we are too small for this, it's too expensive, it's not for us. And you know, when you show the price, when you actually show all those prices, it comes as a big surprise that in many cases it's a lot cheaper to create this VR in a long run instead of hiring a trainer to deliver this training. It's a bit of a background. I'm a trainer myself. I'm a diversity inclusion trainer. I work with companies, with startups, with universities, with embassies, and my rates go between 1,500 to 3,000 per day, right? So and you get to talk a lot about very difficult, very heavy topics like sexual harassment, discrimination, racism, um, you know, sexism, loneliness, burnout, fear. And I personally experience a lot of difficulties right now due to the fact that I cannot simply move my trainings online because they're not going to be safe space for people to talk about such difficult topics. You know, when I have my trainings, it's usually, you know, very safe space. You spend a couple of hours creating the safe space, this physical space. And a lot of people end up crying at workshops because, you know, that's what's designed to bond people, to make them, you know, change their mind, completely change their perspective, this aha moment. And I really believe that, you know, everybody, you look at all universities that talked about for 10, 20 years, we should move online, we should have online courses blended. And then overnight, everybody had to move online, right? But it doesn't work for every topic. So for me as a trainer, the point I'm getting to is, on one hand, it's very interesting to explore. And I know there are lots of trainers in this webinar, that it's very interesting to explore how I can use it as a trainer. On the other hand, it's also a fear whether VR can replace me in the long run.
Yeah, can I just add a couple of things? I mean, technology does replace us in general, but it doesn't. You know, I mean, there were people who took down accounts by hand and wrote them into books, and then Excel came along, and everybody, maybe not in that order, but you know, Excel is there. Everybody uses Sage, whatever, uses an automated software. That doesn't mean that people who were working before are now, you know, there's factories of people just sitting waiting, you know. And you know, when web design came in, offline kind of started going down, people retrain, people change. So technology creates, I'm going to say this without having figures on hand, but I'd say it creates more jobs than it gets rid of. So as it gets rid of jobs, it opens up more opportunity. The second thing I'm going to say is that when you mentioned this, a few things came to mind. So going back to what we mentioned about the wine and the tourism, we created that with a control platform. So the idea of the control platform is that someone using their mobile phone or using online, they basically click through and the image changes. So in terms of coaching or psychology, if you think back to Freud, who said that the psychoanalyst should not be kind of present. He sat behind his customers. So that idea is perfect with virtual reality. So you can put someone in a relaxing atmosphere, and you can guide them through changing the scene on your mobile phone. I mean, if we want to get really futuristic, there are experiments where you hook up an ECG machine. And then one thing I wanted to do, but I don't know where the funding would come to do it, would be to try and have like an acid trip. You know, it's completely generated imagery and things from the ECG, and it renders in real time in the glasses. But you know, in terms of future, that kind of thing could be a way of helping people through this. You could also have artificial intelligence. So you have a training simulation that would probably replace you, but you have like an avatar in the thing that talks and that answers using some kind of conversational user interface. You know, the like new NLP techniques, and then you could have. But then again, your role would change, so you wouldn't be completely obsolete because you would program it and then you would review it and etc. etc.
Whew, thank you, I'm relieved now.
You've still got a job.
There is a question actually related to what I've just asked is, where does VR add value to the trainer's content? And apart from a virtual room and manipulating objects, what is there that can provide more value? For example, analytics.
That was
Sorry,
me. I forgot to sign it.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat that quickly? I dropped, the audio dropped out.
Eduardo, can you repeat that?
Well, basically, I can expand very slightly on it. I'm actually interested in considering VR as a way of training people, but I'm just going to be blunt to be quick. It's a great idea. I place myself with a headset. I don't need to be in the same room with other people. We can all be in a virtual room, but what else is there that would add value to what I do? I mean, dumbing it down, it would be a gimmick that is cool because I can have my logos everywhere. It would be so cool. But does it come, for example, with analytics? I don't know, eye tracking, something that can track positions. How accurate is it? How much data can I give to the person that I'm training right now afterwards? This is because that, if I can give them a percentage like you've increased 10% your attention because your pupil is dilated or your eye movements and so on, this would be amazing for me, but it's something I don't know if it exists or not.
I'm not entirely sure if it exists at this moment, but in the field of, I mean, I think some of the most exciting advances are VR with AI. So in the field of artificial intelligence, you have emotional intelligence, the word's gone right out of my head, but basically it detects your emotional state. So you can, sorry, I think your microphone's on mute.
Yeah, I found myself in a, would you mind moving on to the next question? I have to say goodnight to my kid.
Yeah, I
and
understand.
He's requested a kiss. Can we move on to the next question? I'll come back to you. Sorry.
No problem.
Let's make sure that none of the participants would unmute themselves. We can do it only at the end. Okay. Okay. Sorry, Steven, continue.
I mean, well, maybe it's for the benefit of Eduardo, so maybe we'll come back to that question later.
Yeah. And there was another question, about the, how and where does VR provide incentives for people to move more and more, even do more sports? How and where does VR provide incentives for people to move more or even do sports?
Even do sports. Okay. I mean, I'm not, in terms of sports, I'm not aware of many things. So there are, for example, ski, there are like video games, you know, like ski jumps. And the thing with VR is that you can move your entire body. So I downloaded one quite some time ago when I was visiting family, and it was basically a downhill ski jump, and it ended up being very exhausting because you have to actually move. You know, to get the person to move, you have to move the physical headset because it's tracked, and then to jump, you have to actually move up. So things like that can get you to physically move and get you up out of your seat. There are other things. I mean, there are peripherals that are working on, like hands and things for your shoes, so that you can actually move your feet. And it depends on the developer. It depends on their aim. I will say one thing. I don't want to keep referring back to the things that we've done, but it's just I have a lot of experience in that, so it seems relevant. I'm not trying to plug, but the tourism thing we did, we invited along a journalist one time, and we invited quite a few journalists. We explained, and then we took them out and we gave them a tour. And this was in November in Berlin. It was like -5 degrees or something like that. And this tech journalist put on the glasses and said, and it was an older version, so it wasn't amazing. And he put it on and he said, "Wow, this is amazing." And I was thinking, you know, as a tech journalist, he's seen better. And I said, "What's actually amazing?" And he said, "I'm standing here in Berlin in November, 8 o'clock at night. It's -5 degrees. I can see the sun, and I'm actually warmer." And so this kind of thing, we joked about maybe putting people to Antarctica and they shiver away weight. But it does give you an immersive sensation. And in terms of video games, like simple shooting games, you know, I had one I downloaded. It was a demo, but it was amazing. And you had to hide behind walls and jump out and duck. Like you had to physically duck down. So in terms of moving, I mean, that's completely within the world, within the kind of day-to-day of VR.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you think about I mean, we are lucky here now in Germany, in Netherlands. UK is probably also more or less okay. But in places like Spain, in Italy, and parts of China, I'm not sure if it's still the same. You're not allowed to leave, you're not allowed to go for a walk, France, you know, you've been stopped. So when you think about the impact of coronavirus in the long run, the main question comes to mind when you talk to a lot of corporates and to a lot of people in general is not it's mental health,
Yeah.
right? So we all going to, I don't know, autumn if you're lucky, maybe at the end of the year, going to leave our home, no problem. How is it going to impact us? People who live by themselves, people that kind of gone feral at this stage, not used to, you know, seeing people. How is it going to impact how we trust people, how we see the proximity of people? And, you know, not being outside, it's not good for anybody. You know, for kids, for adults,
Yeah.
for
I mean,
elders, it's how is you, so the question is, maybe now virtual reality could gain more attention and more demand because people don't have any other choice but to put the eyeglasses on and to go for a run at home. My friend in Spain was so jealous of me when I messaged him yesterday saying, oh, I just went for a nice run in the park, sent him photos. And he was like, I can't do it. And, you know,
yeah.
something we take for granted now, some people don't have. So this could be a solution.
And another thing, I lived for quite a few years in Spain, and because they get so many months of such hot weather, the streets and things tend to be closer, and apartments are kind of built so to keep the sunlight out. Whereas, you know, in Northern Europe, we get so little sun that we want, you know, windows, huge windows, and which would turn your apartment into an oven. So I can imagine, you know, somewhere in the center of Madrid, if you're in a small apartment that's very dark, it must be pretty rough. But going back to what I said about the journalist guys, too, I mean, even considering that you're not in a pandemic, uh, in the north of in Sweden and Norway, you know, where they get, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours of sun a day during the height of winter. This kind of thing, putting on the glasses and spending 15 minutes in convincing your brain that you're in the Bahamas and you're on a beach, you know, maybe even making yourself up a nice rum cocktail and, you know, relaxing. This kind of thing can be very beneficial because virtual reality is completely immersive. Uh, Another thing I wanted to point out, you mentioned mental health. There was a very nice project. I don't know, I saw it in its prototype stage. I don't know if it got off the ground, but the idea was that patients who suffer from Alzheimer's, quite often what helps ground them, what helps bring them back to reality, is showing them pictures of their loved ones when they were young, or showing them pictures of something from, you know, which they remember a long time ago, and those kind of deep-rooted memories can bring them back to the present. So what this company did was very, very simply, it wasn't amazing graphics, but what they did was recreated from photographs the kitchen that the elderly person had in the 1960s or the 1940s, whatever, and they could put on their glasses. Then all of a sudden they were back, and then they became coherent again because that somehow rooted their memories and came back. Uh, for seasonal affective disorder, again going back to the Northern Europe, this kind of thing can really help. You know, 15 minutes in the morning when it's dark and gray, put on your glasses, be somewhere you like. You know, a meadow, even something that's like a good quality video of the wind blowing. Turn on a fan behind you. It's I will say one of the best VR experiences I had. We had to give a talk at MIT Europe, MTech Europe. We were presenting a project there, and you can get it online. I'm not going to tell you why, because my hair. It was just when my daughter was born, and my hair was really long, and it looks. I didn't get time to get it cut, and it just looks awful. So I'm very embarrassed about it. But it was this flight company, and they had built this simulator, and you went up through an airport and you could see the entire factory where they produced their planes. And it was this kind of booth that you stood into. It was an Oculus, so it tracked your movement and you could look around, but they had this metal plate which you stood on, and it had a simple motor attached to it, and the motor shook, and it was in time with the vibration. So when the elevator started, the motor shook, and just a slight vibration through the plate, you got this tremendous sensation of going up. And it was the graphics weren't great, but just because of that movement, just because of that mix of sensations. You were totally there, and you were like, whoa, I'm in a lift, and there's no barrier, and I'm like 20 feet up. So virtual reality is completely completely immersive, and it really transports you.
What do you think in terms of companies that you work with or your colleagues work with? Who do you think will jump on board now and embrace virtual reality? Who is ready to have virtual reality, and who is it most suitable for? Or
I mean, the thing is, it's suitable for such a wide range of things. So in terms of education, unfortunately, I don't think schools and I don't think they're that technologically advanced, but imagine giving a history lesson in the Colosseum. You know, imagine how much your kids would pay attention. And simple things like there's a program in the UK. I don't know if anybody knows it. It's called QI, and they do. It's really good. If you don't know, look it up. QI. And they had this very simple explanation of Pythagoras' theorem, and it's the best explanation I've ever seen. And they had this little wheel. I think I sent it to you last week.
yeah.
And they had the right angle triangle, and they had squares, and basically the squares were filled with water. And when you rotated it, the two squares filled up the square at the hypotenuse, and it just totally made sense. And this kind of thing you can do very, very easily inside virtual reality. Another thing where virtual reality totally makes sense is training, corporate training. So for example, you know, fire training, fire drills. You know, you can put people in a dangerous situation, you know, whereas in a company you can't you can't say, well, right guys, we're going to do fire training this week because last week was a disaster. Betty's still in hospital, but we hear she's coming on fine. You know, you can't really burn your employees to do a fire test, but within virtual reality you can do dangerous situations. The industrial image that we showed you, that was to work a 400-ton machine, and a guy reached in and got his arm chopped off by the press. So what they want to do is make sure they can train users to use that machine in a safe way. So it's very, very realistic, but if it goes wrong, then there's no danger. Final thing I'll say on that, and this is related to money, which unfortunately so many things are. There's a rule in HR called 70-20-10 in learning and development. I'm sure most of you know this, but it essentially states that 70% of all an employee's knowledge comes from actually doing the job. 20% comes from their environment, listening to colleagues, watching what people are doing, and only 10% comes from training. So if you turn that around, if you start virtualizing tasks, if you start getting people to do their job, but inside virtual reality, so like the training simulator we saw, cleaning, organizing, they're doing their job, but it's in VR, so that 70% reduces and the 10% increases. So all of a sudden, you've just increased your return on investment. Yeah. So, you know, learning and development, 100% of their money goes to 10% of your knowledge. So if you can virtualize the task, then you're I mean, if you can explain it to the board, the CEO or whoever's giving you money, that's a good thing, I think.
Absolutely. It reminds me of how Walmart, was it Walmart? 2 years ago, they purchased a lot of Oculus glasses to train employees to overcome and survive the Black Friday when it was like all.
Oh, wow.
And you know, they were all over US.
Yeah. I mean, in that kind of thing, you know, so if you have you talk about training, so you know, you can only be on a site at one site at a time. You can do it on a webinar, but you know, how much do you get the person's attention? Whereas if you use VR, then people can do remote visits. They can do remote site visits. You can reach many employees in many sites at once. I'll just touch on the question you asked earlier, Eduardo. The term I wanted was sentiment analysis. So in computer vision, this is a big topic where you can actually pick up. You can do facial
sentiment analysis.
Sentiment analysis.
Okay.
In natural language processing, it's used online. So brands use it in terms of finding out what people are saying. So on Twitter, you know, are people talking positively, negatively? Do the words they use sound happily? How are they talking? But they're starting to use it in computer vision to find out. There was an experiment done, I think it was in Harvard, and they used computer vision to detect body language. There was another one done in Sao Paulo, I can never say that right. I have Brazilian friends that always, it must be more nasal. Sao Paulo. But anyway, they use quite cheap equipment to detect facial movements and what the audience are like, what the students are doing, and they gave this feedback to the lecturer on if the students were bored, if they need to be more interactive. Now, as far as I'm aware, I'm sure there's experiments going on, but the Facebook have Facebook Oculus have tracking within their eye tracking within their glasses, and they did a very cool experiment where they basically used this to recreate the face in real time. So although everybody's got glasses on, you can actually use a webcam and the interior camera, and it can simulate your face. So you can be in a meeting with your glasses, and you can see the other person's actual face. You don't see them with a shoebox in front of their face. So I mean, to my mind, blending those technologies, blending the eye tracking, blending the camera with sentiment analysis, is a way that you can add. So again, analyze at what point people started to drop out. You know, so if you're going through your training, and you can say after 20 minutes people need a break. After 40 minutes, you know, people were staring at the floor or staring at their mobile phones subtly. You know, this kind of thing is a real value add. Whether it's here today, I don't know.
It sounds like another episode of Black Mirror, although I
Yeah.
believe you're living in a Black Mirror episode right now that you cannot really change. Reflecting on what you said now, what you just mentioned about facial expressions, we have a question from the audience. How facial expressions or for general faces will be improved by VR? So far, all my experience was bad, especially with standalone hardware.
What does this mean? Replicating facial experiences?
Expressions, facial expressions.
So, I mean, the most advanced one I know of, and this was because, to just take a step back, I mentioned that we do innovation consultancy. So we work with companies, and we usually work with EU funding, which means we have to produce massive amounts of documentation. And it's kind of these ridiculous 100-page documents, but they go in such deep depth. It kind of sets us apart as a company because we have to learn all that shit. But this Facebook study, I think, was the most advanced. That was last year. Maybe they did it in 2018, but it was really good. You can get it on, if you do Facebook, I think it's Oculus Labs, I think it is, and you might be able to get it online, and you look up they have some videos of how it's tracking. It's really good. Again, I don't know if they, if they faked that in a lab or, but yeah, they say it works. They were using the Oculus, and they said it worked, and it was really impressive.
Fantastic.
So again, maybe we're 1 or 2 years from that. Maybe it's not ready now. Maybe it'll come out, or maybe 2020 is an opportunity for everyone to go back and fix up their research.
Well, if you can get out in 2020.
Yeah.
Do you think prices will go down in the long term? Will it become more mainstream, more integrated in the society and employee, for example? If you look at it now, you're all used to working from home. If you're employed, you have home office, you save time on commuting. How excited are you going to be, and it's a rhetorical question, to be back in the office and homeless commuting? If you live in a big city, spending 1-2 hours every day, would it potentially have more remote work or even virtual offices?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big question. So I have a daughter who's 21 months old, and usually 21 months old this Monday. Usually if you spend more than 10 minutes talking to me, I'll mention her. The thing is, she goes to play school here, and when in a German play school, they have this integration where you're only allowed to bring her, like the first week it's an hour a day, and then the second week, etc., because that way she gets used to the Kita, it's called in Germany, and it's not basically you're saying like, here, go and stay with these strange people after being with mom and dad for a year and a half, see you in 10 hours. It's a process of integrating. But now she's been out of Kita for, I don't know, 20 days, going on for a month. I'm sure in her head, that's it over. We try and remind her, but I'm sure she's thinking that was a strange experiment. I'm glad it's over. But there will be a process. There will be a time when when school's open, Kita is open, and for her, to get back, it's going to be another complicated process. You know, mom or dad are going to have to take time out of work and sit with her and get her used to, I imagine it won't be as hard because she's more mature and she already knows them. But that's the same issue with people in an office. You know, in an office, there's an awful lot of, I don't know, bullshit that goes on. You know, you have your commute, you come in, you have the coffee, you have the polite conversation, you kind of wander about, speak to people, how are they doing? A lot of that's not work. And, you know, when people are sitting at home, they go, this is really weird, you know. But after a month, after 2 months of this, you're used to paying more attention to your children, to working in sweatpants. And I don't know if I told a story earlier with this client. I'm going to tell it. I had this client, and he used to work with me, and then he left. And he called me one day, and I said, "Yeah, how are things?" And he said, "Oh, I'm great. Just sitting in the office." And I said, "What about you?" And he said, "Amazing. I'm sitting by the pool with my noodle hanging out." And I was like, "Jesus Christ!" But that kind of thing, you know, you have. I'm not recommending that you sit naked, but you have freedom to not be so formal and still be professional. You know, all of a sudden, when you know this is over, back to work, you have to put on. You can't wear your sweatpants. You have to be more formal. You have to be in an office somewhere at a certain time, which is not necessarily part of your work routine. You know, you don't need to be there to do it. And the other question, you know, that's going to be a difficult integration. The other thing is, will companies you know, if companies are working 3 or 4 months and, you know, their employees can work or still being productive, are they going to turn around and say, well, yeah, let's keep paying, you know, 20,000 a year for this big expensive office? Or are they going to go, let's reduce that. Let's get rid of that. And like you said, if we go back to the point where, you know, if this face tracking and with headset comes in and we can do that, then you could be in a meeting, you know, you can be in a virtual meeting with your colleagues, see their faces, see their reactions, and then switch off and go and spend 20 minutes with your child. You know, because I mean, I'm aware I talk a lot, but the last thing I'll mention about that is with my daughter, I became very aware of, you know, she goes to bed at 7 o'clock at night, and I became aware of how much of my day is eaten up by transport. You know, because it's kind of time, because I have to take a couple of trains, and it's time that I could be working, I could be more productive, but I have to go on the transport, and then I maybe don't get enough time. I have to make the decision: should I leave now and put her to bed, you know, go home, or should I work and finish this, or can I do it tomorrow? Whereas virtually, you don't have that hassle. You know, I can spend an hour putting her to bed and come back, and I'm still working. I'm still in the office.
Absolutely. Do you have people ask, you know, I talk with some companies and they approach me and they say, yeah, like I have to move trainings online. Can we have online course? Do people approach you with the same question, asking, well, I have a choice to have an online course or to make a virtual reality, and I will probably choose online because it's cheaper? Do they compare between different?
I don't think they compare. I think we're
misunderstanding and people who are not experienced with that, especially.
Yeah. I mean, we had a client recently. I did a report on the ed tech and AI and where they meet. And the reason why we did the report is we're trying to develop something for them. But when we presented all of these ideas and we were saying this is what AI can do for you, and they're essentially a learning platform. It's a very nice project. It's financial inclusion for the third world. And they come from a financial background and an educational background, a learning background. So they're not necessarily tech people. And when we started saying, yeah, you can add machine learning here, and you know, it was as if we were saying, yeah, why don't we build a spaceship? So the thing is, once you have this technology, once you understand, this technology, then you can see where it can be integrated, and you can see where it brings benefit. And that's, I think, our biggest problem is educating people as to where this can go. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons behind this, the 30-minute free consultancy we're giving, because we can have a conversation with people. We can see what they're doing. We can see what their problems are. And then at that point, we can see where virtual reality can help you in this way. And we can help, I'm not going to say change their mind, but we can help open up their eyes to what it can do, rather than think, no, my God, virtual reality is for killing zombies. You know, what part has that got to do with with my corporate experience.
Absolutely. You know, when I think of virtual reality and things like, as I mentioned in the beginning, come to mind as Matrix, Black Mirror, all this kind of scary things. And to me, you know, what's happening in the world now, and it's just my personal opinion, is also very scary to be conditioned to stay at home. And you may agree and disagree, all of the audience. It's all, you know, everybody's free to express their opinion. But the way we are conditioned to stay at home and kind of get used to the idea that home is safe, home is good, everything else outside is bad and scary and should not. And, you know, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and then we kind of believe in the idea of whatever is outside is a big dangerous world. And then things like virtual reality and tracking and lack of privacy comes into, because how does virtual reality and privacy and, you know, human rights will balance? Because, you know, when you look at what countries do now, what China does now, what happened in Italy as well, the way you track, I know it's a little bit of a different topic, but I'm sure it all relates, the way you track people where they are in order to, you know, to ensure that everybody's safe. And, you know, but that it's all temporary. But we all know nothing can be more permanent than temporary things. That's, you know, that's how Hitler came to power. That's how Israel has a state of emergency for the past 30 years, and so on and so forth. And things like this scare me. And I really believe that it might be also a question for us to look at the downside of how this technology evolves, what is artificial intelligence, tracking devices, virtual reality, and how they potentially could put us in Matrix, you know. And just like in movie Inception, you don't even know what is the reality anymore, and what is virtual reality, especially.
Yeah.
So what can you see potentially looking at the downside of virtual reality? And I know it's all about how you use it, because you can use whatever instrument in a good way, in a bad way. It's all about the intentions. But what is your personal perspective on the negative side of how people use VR?
I mean, for me, I tend to be very positive about technology. So I mean, and I also think if anybody knows of any funding, I have some great ideas about how we could model a society. And I think the coronavirus, I've been trying to work this out for a few years, but I mean, I think in terms of the coronavirus, I think if we spend a few months inside our houses, I honestly don't think that we'll get to the point where, like you say, that this dystopian view where outside bad, inside good. I think we'll get to the point where we start reflecting on what really is important, you know, because we've been, I don't know, 3 months without showing off in public my new suit, you know, without the latest haircut or whatever. And well, I think everybody after 3 months, everybody will have their own haircut, you know, with the clippers inside or have massive hair. But I think in terms of just looking at virtual reality, again, it's the uses. So, you know, if you start going down controversial routes, so there are things like pedophilia, like abuse. You know, if you can, so this whole thing, again, the name's gone out of my head, where you can put someone's face on a different body. It's completely forgotten. But you have, you know, people are starting to put famous people on porn stars, and and you can have people talking, and it's their voice animated. They've done a very famous one with Bill Clinton and one with Obama. But that kind of thing, you know, is it abuse if, I don't know, if someone is a stalker and they put someone's, like the image of their fantasy on a porn star and they can have sex with them? Is that, or even, you know, children, if they're virtual children, is that abuse? Or is that a way that they can get rid of their fantasies and exercise their fantasies? So I mean, those are kind of the darker sides of VR. I don't know what the question, what the answer is. Sorry, you know, I don't know if that's something that. I mean, this goes back. I read many years ago where someone was talking about online, we can use the mask of anonymity to, flame people online or send hate mail. But the question is really, is that a mask, or is the mask the actual face we use every day when we have to control ourselves and when we have to talk to people in a civil manner? And is the hateful person online who's telling people, ah, you suck, is that our real self? And the thing is, to what level will we discover that within virtual reality? But again, like I said, I'm always positive. So I think, virtual reality is a way, going back to, dating used to be completely offline. And when online dating started, people were saying, oh no, you can't, it's so cold, it's so mechanical, you can't, but now everybody meets everybody on Tinder. And so the question is, will these virtual worlds, will they open up a new world? Will they be like the old shamanic experiences? Will they be like LSD experiences without the side effects of taking drugs? Will they be mind altering experiences? Or, I mean, that's another positive way where we can connect. So the experience we did in Sublimotion, the kind of idea behind that was that you can eat anywhere at any time with anyone. So that was kind of the concept. So you put on virtual reality glasses and you can be at a virtual table with your grandparents who are in Australia and you're in, I don't know, New York. And it obviously, it was just a kind of proof of concept in their restaurant. But things we're talking about, our VR wine experience, so with the coronavirus, just to explain, it's essentially you get a series of wines, you go along with a sommelier, and he explains the wine. And as he explains, he changes on his phone using the platform. He flips through characteristics of the wine, flavors and aromas, so that when you smell the wine, you can actually, because you're mixing the olfactory and the visual, you're making a much stronger combination. And most people will smell it and go, yeah, whatever you say. But when you're smelling it, you're going, yeah, I can actually smell strawberries. I can see strawberries and I can smell them. So we're considering doing that online. So it could be some kind of wine club where, once a month we invite a winemaker, and, through the club we provide his wines. People can get together in this virtual wine tasting. They can have 10, 100, 200 people. And, so you're creating communities in that way. So I don't know if it's all negative. I think there are.
No, I just want to be that devil's
advocate. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thinking about food, as there's a joke on the internet, half of us will come out as fantastic cooks, the other half become alcoholics.
Yeah.
So, the question is,
I'm both.
I'm dying for some particular. I really want sushi. I really, really want sushi, and I miss sushi, and I can't find any. My favorite sushi place is closed, and I really is going to go bankrupt because it's very small, and they're not on the health in Berlin. That's the danger of having the consequences of Corona. But food definitely, it's will be very, very interesting experience.
Yeah, I mean the thing I saw a couple of like when VR first came out, there were a couple of experiences where you cooked inside food, and it was really cool. I mean, food is one of my passions, and I was, I don't want to say I was disappointed, but everybody was talking about how it changed. I have liked this experience in terms of food because we don't go to
experience. I'm sorry.
The coronavirus. Because basically I cook all the time, and I'm kind of controlling the food now. So I'm here to prepare every meal for the family. We have almost zero waste, and people are saying I'm a lot more conscious about what I'm using. I know this is way off topic, but things like broccoli. When you make broccoli, most people cut off the stem and throw it away. But the stem can be pickled. You can slice it up and pickle it. Or, I use it in soups, because it's a good base for soup. It adds fiber. It adds all the broccoli flavor. This kind of thing I've been doing for a long time. So I'm kind of going, yeah, well, nothing really has changed,
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of self-employed, nothing that much that has changed.
Yeah.
For employed people, I think it's a lot more difficult. For people with kids, that's a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
So I can see Eduardo violently nodding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. With my partner, we're taking turns in childcare, and the thing is, I don't know what age your son is, Eduardo, but my daughter's 21, 2. Yeah, very, very similar. And they don't understand that, you know, dad has to work. You know, it's basically, dad, why is dad in that room talking to nobody? Let me get it. One thing I'll point out, which is slightly worrying for me, is my daughter has. We used to let her watch, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes of TV. We're now letting her watch a lot more, like YouTube videos and things, like kind of learning videos, not soap operas and things like that. But it's just for our mental health, you know, because then she gets into it. But one thing I noticed is that she starts offering her dummy to the moon, you know, and there's a song she likes, and I'm wondering, because all of her relationships now are on screens. You know, she talks to her grandmother, she talks to her cousins, she talks to, and I'm wondering, you know, does she think the moon is, you know, it's like calling granny? You know, so I wonder what is this? What effect is this having on how our kids interact with each other and with technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting experience what's going to happen now, and how it's going to impact us in general. Like, you know, looking at different generations, you know, we used to play outside.
Yeah.
You know, your kid, Eduardo's kid, you know, my kids, if I have, they're not going to play outside as much, and you know, it's going to be different norm. You know, the world evolves. So same with virtual reality, right?
Do you know? Sorry to interrupt. I remember something that my business partner, because we have a completely virtual team, and my business partner, like, we go to a lot of events together, and when we're together, we always end up, because you're all day, it's quite intense, and we always end up talking about random things. And we talked about this because we were walking through Berlin, and there's a lot of young kids, like 9, 10, 11, that ride the subway on their own. You'll see them, these tiny kids with a huge backpack, and you're kind of going, your parents aren't there? And we discussed this, and we discussed why. And I think the thing is, Germany, in Germany, in Berlin, at least, people will get involved. You know, if they see a kid or they hear a shout, you know, they'll say, hey, is everything okay? Whereas I know in the UK, definitely, and he was saying in Spain, people will stand back, you know, because if you walk over to a kid, they're going to go, what are you doing with that kid? You know, or if a kid falls and you pick it up, you know, people are going to go, did you push my kid? I'm going to sue you. So I think we're losing that sense of community, which means people become more and more isolated. So maybe a positive of this whole coronavirus is that we start reaching out to people more, you know, because my girlfriend was saying, she was laughing, she said she's losing her voice because she's talking so much in webinars and communicating. So maybe through all of this, we realize that we are, you know, we're a community of 7 billion people.
Yeah.
And you can't be, the guy Penn Jillette, he's a magician, but he's also really good, really interesting when you speak to him. He said, you're either a community of 1 or a community of 7 billion. You know, he said, there's no these groups. We're all humans. We're all in this together. And I think the coronavirus has completely shown that. And I think that the technology is a good way of building communities, of reaching out to people and reinforcing that.
Yeah, funny, because I actually wrote an article about it today, how building an inclusive community is the best thing right now you can do for your organization.
Yeah.
I really dislike the term of social distancing. I think it brings a lot of negative connotation.
Yeah.
It misleads people. It's not social distancing. It's the worst thing you can do at the moment is to distance yourself. It's physical distancing.
Yeah.
What we should do is social closeness right now, right? When you have a problem, do you separate yourself from your family, from your friends? No, you don't. And now all of us have a problem. I think it's really dangerous term, and it's really, you know, I really like what you said about communities. And I've been attending, or at least trying to attend, a lot of virtual conferences happening every single day right now. And since it's all borderless, you don't really need to actually attend them. You can attend different ones in London, in New York, and whatever part of the world you want to be in. Have this matchmaking, this random matchmaking, the way you have group of 2, group of 3, have a conversation. Didn't really strike me yet. I still find it a bit awkward, especially when you don't know who you're talking to, and then you just kind of like, hi, okay, we have 5 minutes to network. So it didn't reach that level. Maybe people are not used to it. So you know how if you network somewhere and at a meetup, you're kind of like, oh, she's going to grab some water. Oh, here's my friend. I'm sorry, nice talking to you. But, you know, you can't really like log out. You know, I mean, I feel really bad by saying this, but yesterday I was at one of these virtual conferences and was having the most hideous conversation ever. It was just, maybe it was because it was 9 in the morning. I don't know. I'm not the worst person, 9 in the morning, but it was just going so bad. And then you try to live politely, and then you kind of like, hey, what? I can't hear you. What? You know, and it's just, you know, probably not the best, most professional way to live. But I think we as people are not used to this kind, especially strangers.
Yeah.
So the question is, will virtual, you know, when you actually see the person more virtual, so to say, an avatar, will bring us closer together. You know, I would love to have my mom sitting right now here in this room and chatting with her. I would love that. I miss her. And I don't know where I'm going to see her next. And, you know, WhatsApp calls and video calls. You know, same with the thing about colleagues. You know, how are you going to feel if you live by yourself, you haven't seen your colleagues live for a very long time? You're not going to be feel very connected. You, first of all, you burn out, because when you work from home, you can't really separate work
Yeah,
and
it's difficult. Yeah.
first of all, it's mental health issues and burnout. And then you're gonna not really connected to your company unless a company makes a feeling of inclusive community. Not many companies think about it. They think about survival. So maybe this virtual connection, virtual communities, when done right, not just, you know, hopping in a call and, you know, talk to a stranger, would definitely have a bit of more helpful, you know,
It,
mental.
it, it's definitely coming. Remind me, I want to tell you a quick story first. Remind me about volumetric streaming in case I forget. That's the answer to your question. But one thing I wanted to say, a colleague of mine went to China. He went to a fair, and this company gave him a little pin for his mobile phone. So it was like a headphone jack with a button on top of it, and it had 3 programmable functions. So one, you could press it and you got your contact list. One, you could press it and open Facebook, whatever. You could program it. But one of the functions could be that you basically create a fake contact, so you can call it the boss,
Mm-hmm.
and you press this button 3 times. So when you're standing up and it's in your pocket, it's very easy to put your thumb on it and press it 3 times, and then your phone rings and it's a false call. And you pick it out and you show them, you go, oh, look, it's the boss. And you go, what, boss? Yeah, over there? Okay, I have to go. So I thought that was genius when you're trapped at an event with someone you don't want to talk
Date,
to.
you know, a
Yeah.
dead blind date.
Exactly. But I wanted to go back to volumetric streaming. So volumetric streaming is something that's permissible by 5G. So we're getting into this world now where 5G, AI, IoT, VR, they're all starting to blend. So when we talk about the future, it's very difficult to talk about any one of them separately because they depend on each other. Volumetric streaming is basically where you get like a ring of cameras and you project a scene in 360 degrees in real time to somewhere else. So the kind of use cases, but you need 5G because it's a massive amount of data and it needs to be done. The promise of 5G is speed, bandwidth, and zero latency, or almost zero latency. If you don't know what latency is, it's basically the delay between something happening and the response. So, for example, you know, you get a satellite delay. The old, you know, in the 80s in Eurovision when they had we have the results from France, and then like 4 seconds later, oh yeah, hi. That's latency. So the promise with 5G, wherever you are in the world, it's almost zero latency. So this brings in things like automatic cars. You know, if they're all connected with 5G, then as soon as something happens up front, the signal propagates right through the network and every car knows to stop. So it's not like, you know, so an automatic car sees an old woman, it takes 2 seconds to tell it to stop, it stops when it's already driven over her. But the thing is, you have zero latency, so you can, and huge bandwidth, so you can transmit everything in real time, and you can, any movement you make with glasses, it happens in the real world. So one thing is you can have very simple glasses, very dumb glasses, and all they do is translate coordinates to the server. You know, he's looking this way, he's looking that way. And the server does all the complicated calculations, so you can have really high quality graphics. And using 5G, it's sending that information to your headset to be displayed in real time. I don't know if I'm going to throw a lot of technology at you, but there's another thing called foveated rendering. So basically it renders this like a cone. So you have in the center it's really, really sharp, and then here it's not quite so sharp, and then here it's not really that sharp, and then behind you it's not rendered. So the amount of image you have to render is very little. If you're doing this, that makes streaming a lot easier. And if you're doing that, you can have virtual presence. And the use case for it at the minute is, imagine you have a fault in a plant, in an engineering plant, and the company have to send their senior engineer to go and he charges 150 an hour, 200 an hour, and he needs to travel for 3 hours or travel for like 1 hour then 1 hour back. He needs to be on site, etc., etc. It makes more sense for them to send a junior engineer who's a lot cheaper, who might even be on site, set up this information, that transmits it to head office where the senior engineer is, and he can spend 3 hours doing the work. So it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot quicker, and he can actually attend 4 or 5 different sites in one day rather than waiting. So this is volumetric streaming. They use it in Belgium. There's Belgium TV do it. If anyone's in Belgium and you've watched the football, I don't know what channel it is. I was speaking to them at a conference last year, I think it was, and they basically, when the footballers come off the pitch, they sit in this bit of a studio, and it captures them in 360. Then they're projected into the TV studio, and it appears like they're there. It's almost, you know, like this perfect hologram. So that kind of thing, quite easily, you could do it with your mother, you know. And 5G, I would say, all of these things, you know, from their inception to when they're possible, I'd say it takes 4 or 5 years for it to be normal. To have your mother sitting with you at the dinner table.
Would be nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know of any athletes using VR now to train? Because, you know, Olympic Games postponed, a lot of other games are postponed. So I'm just wondering, because I know one of the football clubs in UK, I can't remember, it was like, yeah, I can't remember how, but I think they bought VR recently just to train in isolation.
Yeah, I mean, we built a simulation a couple of years ago. We tried to, it never worked out. We pitched this the simulation where basically the idea was that you could record, because footballers have all this information. They record the information and positional information, and then afterwards they analyze it. And our idea was to basically render that as a team, so you can put the person in the position of any footballer on the field.
Oh, right, okay.
So basically, you know, the manager can go back and say, look, the opposition scored a goal. Put yourself here, and you know you're in this position. And they say, look behind you. You can't see the attacker. You need to be back, and you know he can move you back and say you need to be here. This is the position. So the footballer can visualize it, and then you know the next day when they're playing, they're like, oh shit, you know I need to be standing here.
You can basically be in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, and you can see from very different points of view.
It's, for me, as a, you know, who works in diversity inclusion, it's a very, very interesting point, you know, trying to connect the differences, you know, to have men in women's shoes or vice versa, or someone who is...
That's okay in Berlin, you can do that.
Someone who's handicapped, for example, yeah, how do they feel? How do they, you know, you can, whatever, like if you cannot hear, if you cannot walk properly, to, you know, to build empathy. And things like leadership skills, right? When you need to have this difficult conversation, when you need to, for example, to fire someone, how do you do that? How do you do that? You can actually practice this, right? And, you know, things like building intercultural bridges, you know, especially in war zone, how do you build this connection of people that have historically hated each other, to actually see someone else's perspective and seeing, you know, connecting bridging the differences and then seeing what are the similarities between them. So that's a beautiful experience.
There was a very interesting experiment done, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, by The Guardian, I think it was, and it was life in solitary confinement. You know, because a huge, basically the prison system in the United States is an industry, you know, because they produce so many white goods, and all of the military stuff is produced essentially for free by prisoners, and an awful lot of people are living in solitary. And this showed you, it was a VR experience which showed you what it was like to live in solitary, and it was pretty horrible. And you know, you're in the experience for 10 minutes, but you know, you're there for a long time. So that that kind of thing where, wow, your background's gone crazy.
Yeah, let me turn it off. I think it's been.
That kind of thing, yeah. I mean, it's really good. And going back to again, blending artificial intelligence and VR. So when CUI, computational user interfaces, become a lot more intelligent, then you can blend that with an avatar, for example, and you could have that type of training conversation. You can fire someone and they could cry, and you could have like a word cloud above their head. So you can train sales, maybe have a salesperson to say, this mobile phone is the best mobile phone in the world. There aren't any other mobile phones like this mobile phone. And the system will go, wow, you're using mobile phone too long. Try using communication device. Try using, phone, whatever. And that kind of thing, I can easily see that being built into virtual reality for situations where you're dealing with humans and you need that training so that you don't get it wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, I really see it's a way to build empathy. It's a way to bridge the differences and connections. Beautiful.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, as a recap, I would say that it's quite interesting to see where it's going. And I think my theory is that it's going to increase a lot more. I don't know how you think, but it seems that we kind of are becoming more used to virtual world and probably going to be more receptive of a virtual reality. And looking at the benefits of as a community, spending time with family, all this gas emissions of traveling,
Yeah.
so much money and so on and so forth. So Greta will be very happy. So all these kind of things that definitely make us think that the benefits of that. I still see some downside, and it really depends on who uses it and for which cases and which users. But definitely very, very interesting. I would say for now we'll have another 5 minutes. There are a couple of questions that they're online, but we mostly answered all of them. There is a question from Miko, and he's asking, I'm interested in the topic of immersive learning. For example, how do you measure retention or engagement? And what kind of results are you getting?
At the minute, we're not attention and engagement. I mean, what we've done in that is essentially theoretical. We built this is not VR; it's more online learning. So we built a solution, a machine learning solution for a company in Spain. And what we did, we employed cluster analysis. So we essentially mapped what happened previously and then projected it onto the persona of the person who's taking the course. And we were able to improve churn rate because we were able to detect that this person has this type of profile, and this type of profile tend not to do well in 100% online courses. They need video or whatever. And there's two circumstances. So we can recommend to the person, this isn't the best course for you. Or, if they need to do that course, we can recommend to their boss that they get a bit more prompting. So this person has a profile that's probably not going to complete the course. Send them an email, say, hey, how's it going? Are everything okay with the course? Do you need help? And just try and keep them. I mean, that relates to another concept where when you start a course, tell as many people as you can that you're doing the course, and say, and then the thing is, because if it's just me and I stop it, I'm like, bah, I wasn't interested. But then if you tell 20 people I'm doing this course, they're going to go, what happened? And then you have to tell 20 people, I really couldn't be bothered, and they go, oh my God, you're lazy. So it's kind of linked to that, where your boss can again, I don't want to use track, because then track has negative connotations, but your boss can help you
Monitor.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, in terms of that, but then it goes back to the sentiment analysis. So this is like a really kind of new topic where using facial tracking. Facial tracking, you can see what a person is. You can see how much attention they're paying. You can see if they're bored. You can see where they drop out and how to change material so that it keeps their interest.
Yeah, it seems like technology, I mean, it's already happening now, but Google knows about us more than we do about ourselves, and that's what technology is going. So, you know, the best thing you can do now is to actually start learning about ourselves, because I see that, you know, technology sometimes knows so much better. You know, all these predictions and so on and so forth. You know, eye movement, how much. Oh, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn on the light. I'm trying to. The light changes color, so I want to get there.
What's going on? Yeah.
I'm in Berghain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there's another concept. This is where I say all the technology links. So there's a concept called the fog and the edge. So when you have IoT, basically you have all the devices, and you can have thousands of devices gathering petabytes per day of data. And to send all that to a central server, to have something process it and then send it back, it doesn't really make sense, even though you have 5G, massive bandwidth, etc. So there's a concept of the intelligent edge. So the edge is basically where the devices are. It's not a central server, it's out where the devices are. And the idea of putting intelligence on the edge means that these devices have enough intelligence to make their own decision without it having gone back to a central server. So an example is, imagine you have a HD camera in an old people's home. You don't want the camera recording everything that the person is doing, but you want the camera able to detect their position and their pose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if they're lying on the floor, the camera has enough intelligence to create an alert. And I think that's basically where we should go, not possibly where we are going. But if you have the kind of Star Trek, you know, the computer where you can say, "Hi computer, where is, you know, so and so." Nobody wants to give that information, although we're doing to Amazon, to Google. If you have a system where that intelligence is in your house, and then you can sell your data, you know, you can sell to Amazon, I'm happy for you to have this data, and I will charge this amount of money.
It's not because you have a choice, right?
At the minute, you don't have a choice, because we're all in the Facebook model. We're not in the Netflix model. You know, Facebook, everything's free, and you're basically the product. Yeah. Whereas Netflix, you're paying for the product, so you're getting it, so there's no ads. And Netflix don't really need to sell your data. Netflix they have recommendation engines. It's a use case, an example in recommendation Rexis circles. But they use your data in that way, but they don't sell your data to advertisers. And I think, you know, if we move to a system where people are kind of used now to getting things for free, and the cost of that is your personal identity. So if we could make an intelligent edge where you paid for the IT, you know, you could lease it or something like that, but it wasn't selling your data and it was working for you. So, you know, we're working on a couple of projects where it's along those lines, where it's intelligent assistance. It's not about selling your data, it's about helping you out. But the question is, will people pay for that? We're so used to getting everything for free that, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. Just one last question. I really like what you said about, you know, studying a course and stuff. A little bit of a background. I studied in New Zealand, and it's, you know, education in Ireland is for free. In Germany, it's not very expensive compared to many Anglo-Saxon countries. For me, my education was around 30,000 euro. So it's for everybody. It's there. You don't have a choice, right? Yeah. You might get a scholarship, but there is no free education. So it's ridiculously expensive. You get a student loan, but the fact is, you don't pay for a year. You pay for each course that you take. So the problem is, if you suddenly halfway through the year or after a year or 2 years, you decide that that's not what I thought it was, and I really want to become, I don't know, chemical engineer or marketing director or whatever you can imagine, you have to, you know, switch and pay, you know, you still pay for those courses because you took a loan for it, you studied, and then make another choice and study again. And I really like what you said about, you know, when you can actually visualize what is the job going to be about, how am I going to experience that, I think a lot of people will make much better choices in life, because a lot of people are pressured into, or have this kind of illusion that, you know, being a doctor is the best thing in the world, or being, I don't know, an accountant is the best thing in the world, or, you know, construction, you know, design or whatever not. And then when you actually get a job, realized that that's not what I thought. And I spent already 4 years of my life, 5 years of my life studying, then I paid so much money, I have a student loan, might as well work. And then people are unhappy. If we had this kind of choice to actually visualize how is it going to be, what's it going to be about, I think a lot of people would generally be happier.
Yeah, when I was 18, I was on a plane going to the United States, and I met this really interesting guy who was sitting beside me. He had a company that basically they analyzed crops, and he was one of the only companies in the world that did it. So they got a lot of money, and he was analyzing crops in Iran, and he couldn't actually go in being American, but he had to hire local people there. But he went to Oman or something like that and conducted them. The point I'm making was he said that he offered to pay the education of his workers. So he set up a fund, and because it was kind of a fund like charitable, he got the tax back in that, so he got tax breaks. But also his employees were fiercely loyal, because if they left him, then they would have to pay for the kids' education. So I think it's ridiculous that you have to pay for healthcare and education. I think as a society, those are the most important things, and we should be paying. It's in society's aim that we pay for that. But I think there are methods of control. You know, like I said, when you have someone who has 100,000 euros of debt in student debt, they're going to look after their job, and they're going to accept lesser conditions. You know, Germany working conditions are great, because you don't have 100,000 euros of debt on your head. You know, if you get fired, you're not going to be, you know, what the hell's going to happen? There's a welfare system, so it becomes a lot fairer. There was another question. I was going to say another story, but it's gone out of my head. Did that answer your question, or did I get lost?
You got lost, but it's fine. But I mean, you know, as you promised, you're becoming a lot more philosophical in jumping off the topic. But
Yeah.
I would say we can wrap up now. We're going to send you a follow-up email for everybody who participated today, with probably some slides, if Siri is okay with that, and some links and all the information and so on and so forth. So don't worry if you didn't have enough of notes, and sorry if you didn't have a chance to answer some of the questions, but you're more than welcome to send a private message to either myself or set up this consultation, even if it's relevant, if that's what you need. Also, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. If you're in Berlin, or if you're not in Berlin, you know, we live in a borderless world now, so it doesn't really matter where you are, we can see each other. Especially if you're in L&D, HR department, feel free to join BerLearn Network. We have lots of cool events coming up. Yeah, so thank you so much. It was fantastic speaking with you. I'm sure we can go on another 2 hours about that.
I need to put my daughter to bed, so yeah. Dad needs to give her a kiss.
That's
yeah. Thank you, and I just want to say thank you for everyone who stuck with us and who attended and put up with me talking for so long. Yeah, the form's there. Fill it out if you want to talk to us. And I mean, it says VR, but you know, we do a lot in machine learning. We have a lot of experience in serious games. You know, so if any of those topics are interested, just let us know.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone who stayed, who engaged, who asked questions. Didn't really have a chance to. I see there are lots of conversations